All right, so my name is Rondell Gibson. I am the program director of the North Bay, and I am going to now go ahead and turn it over to my co-host, Itzel.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name's Itzel Sosa Cervera, and I'm the program manager for College of Marin.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Tanya Requenes, and I'm the College Success Director.
Good morning, everybody. Buenos dias. My name is Carla Santiago, and I'm the 4-year Success and Alumni Director, and I've been here with the org for the past 4 years.
Thank you all for introducing yourselves. So we're excited that you're all present. We're excited to share this information with you as we have just learned. So we're going to go ahead and give you our best today. The focus of today, like I said earlier, we'll be able to go through financial aid over the next 2 days. You know, we want to talk with everybody about financial aid so that way every student throughout Marin, Sonoma, and supporting counties can receive the support they need to get to and through college, hopefully for free or at a very inexpensive rate for them and for the student and their families. We're going to be covering some additions that have been made to FAFSA or that will be coming up over the next 2 years. Cool. As everybody knows, we're going to talk about completing FAFSA's California DREAM Acts. And that is the first step. That's where every student should start, as this is a needed portion for schools and scholarship agencies to be able to determine how much and what they should offer to a student and their families. This is huge. So making sure that we're going to make sure we give you all the right information today. Great. So a lot of everyone is wondering or may wonder where financial aid comes from. What is it made up of? We're going to cover that. So there's 3 categories that make up financial aid. One is the gift aid. You can think of this as money being given to a student from relatives or even money that they received from scholarships or Pell Grants through filling out FAFSA, California DREAM Act. And then we have our work aid. This is where students can either hold a job to pay for their education, or even have what's called work study. But only way to be qualified for work study or can be considered is to fill out a FAFSA or California DREAM Act, and then that money can be used to pay for the student's education or any other item that makes up for cost of attendance. Our third and last category is loans. This is money, as we all know, that is borrowed. So we always tell students to look at this as a last option. In case you're wondering, how does this work? I fill out application, and then what? So first, like we've been saying, or I've been saying, the students will complete a California DREAM Act or a FAFSA, whichever one is right for them and their families. Once that is processed, that is a student is going to receive an EFC. It stands for Expected Family Contribution. This number is what the college or the institution is going to use to determine the package that they can offer the student and their families. And then that helps the student determine their cost of attendance. And then from there, a financial aid package is given to the student, and the student can figure out if that is the best package for them and then negotiate their package with the financial aid office, and hopefully they'll have enough money. And that's exactly what we're going to cover today. In case you're wondering about privacy, there's something called the FERPA Act. This went into act in 1974, basically giving students the privacy or taking let's say the responsibility off of the parent and giving it to the student, and also means that only the student's information will be shared with the student and no one else. Now, you may be wondering, if a student fills out a FAFSA, what aid can they be considered for? Well, a student will be considered for Pell Grant as well as the CADA grant. These are both federal-based grants, and the Pell Grant ranges anywhere from $1,000 to $6,495. Now, the way that families can figure out where they fall in this is to do a FAFSA, and the FAFSA will spit out an EFC. That EFC essentially will be the amount, if you subtract it from the maximum, will give a student their amount of what they're receiving, as well as the FAFSA will tell the student exactly what they're receiving or capable of receiving. And for CEOG, this is a limited source of funding. Not every college will have a budget for CEOG. Only participating colleges will have this budget, and they have a limited source of funds to offer students. So we do see our students receiving the CEOG, and this typically happens for students with extreme need. They typically have a 0 EFC. And just because a student receives it in their first year does not mean that they will receive it in their second, third, or fourth, or fifth, or sixth year. It's not a guaranteed source. But a way that we've been able to help students receive this is to make sure that they complete their financial aid applications early to get an early start, because this money goes fast. Here we go, we have Cal Grant. This is a state-based funding. This is only the money that is going to come from California, and our California DREAM Act students can receive this funds, but California DREAM Act students cannot receive Pell Grant nor CEOG. Cal Grant A is a difference between the colleges that our students will attend. So a student can attend a UC, you'll notice that they can receive $12,570. And if they attend a CSU, they can receive $5,742. Then the amount is also different for private schools. Now, in order to be considered for Cal Grant A, a student has to fill out a FAFSA, a California DREAM Act, and then their school also has to submit their GPA to CSAC. Here's where I'm going to advise that everybody make sure, if you're working with students, that their names are updated with the school, that their first name, last name is current and matches their birth records, and then that way they can be considered and won't be their information won't be lost anywhere. We have Cal Grant B. This is for students who have a minimum GPA of a 2.0 or higher, and their families fall within the income range. You'll notice here in the first year for UC or CSU that students will receive a stipend of $1,648. But the cool thing about Cal Grant B is that within a student's second or third or fourth year, they can receive the $1,648, but in addition, they will get the cost of tuition paid as well. And then for students going to a community college, they can receive $1,648 for Cal Grant B. Then we have our Cal Grant C, and this is for students who are going to go through certificated programs through the various colleges out there, even community college. And these are also can apply to technical colleges as well. Then there's the Chafee Grant, which is our students who are foster youth will be the ones who can be considered for Chafee. And their maximum range is $5,000. For the families who do not qualify for Cal Grant, but yet fall with under the $191,000 income ceiling, can receive let's say a reduction in tuition for the California State Universities and Universities of California. So what that means is students that fall under $191,000 can be considered for the middle class scholarship. All right, so we're going to talk about AB 469, the changes, the additions that's happened to financial aid this year or next year. So as you can see, it adopts a requirement that local education agencies will confirm that all graduating seniors complete a financial aid application or opt out. So what does this mean? This means that every California high school has to make sure that students complete a FAFSA or a California DREAM Act in order as a graduation requirement, which is a big hooray, right? This is a good thing. There's data out there that supports students who fill out a FAFSA or California DREAM Act are much more likely to go to college and graduate. So we want to make sure that we do our due diligence and support the students in our schools. Also means that requires the commission to develop regulations and standardize the forms. So this is great. This is going to minimize any of the holdup or the barriers for our students and the barriers that our students encounter. And we want to make this process easier, and I'm happy to see that California and the federal government is making this possible, and so are all the schools. Great. Students can opt out of this if they don't want to complete a FAFSA for whatever reasons. They have to fill out a form through the school and get themselves removed. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to my coworker now.
All right, thank you, Rondell. So now we're going to go into different types of grants and access awards. And the awards that I'm going to be talking about are administered by CSAC, the California Student Aid Commission. And this is coming back, the Cal Grant Award for students with dependents. So Cal Grant recipients who have dependent children and will be attending a UC, CSU, or community college may be eligible to receive the Access Award up to $6,000. Again, students must first complete a FAFSA or California DREAM Act to be eligible, and dependent children must be 18 years of age and receive more than 50% of the student's support in order to qualify. Students, if awarded, will be receiving a preliminary award message from CSAC, and they will be instructed then to log into the Web Grants account to confirm that they are students with dependent children. And here are the amounts for the Cal Grant B and A, it's $6,000, and for Cal Grant C, it's $4,000. And students on the FAFSA or California DREAM Act application will indicate there's a question that will ask them if they have dependents, and this is where they'll indicate that. Okay, and this is new, which I'm very excited about. It's the new Cal Grant expansion for California community college students. And so for the students who maybe did not meet, who were not awarded the Cal Grant A or B at the time of the student's high school graduation, but are planning on enrolling at a community college, they may submit the community college GPA in lieu of the high school GPA to reestablish their GPA. Students must complete at least 16 units at the community college with a 2.0 eligibility, and then who meet the Cal Grant eligibility requirements, so the income ceiling. But if they do, they can reestablish their GPA. This is going to greatly increase the number of students eligible for financial aid, and this is for the FAFSA and California DREAM Act. And also another just cool thing is that the March 2nd deadline is the priority deadline for a lot of the aid, but for the community college students, this is going to be pushed back to September 2nd. We still really recommend that students submit their application by March 2nd, the priority deadline. But for those who end up missing the March 2nd deadline, there's some flexibility. So for example, this past September 2nd, just a few days ago, that was the deadline for the 21-22 financial aid year. Let's see. And students receiving this award may be eligible to receive this for transfer purposes as well for UCs and CSUs, and students transferring to a private institution. That will not be a guarantee, but will be considered, or it will be considered the transfer entitlement or competitive Cal Grant if they miss the priority deadline. Okay, and this is also new Foster Youth Access Award, also administered by the California Student Aid Commission, and will be available through web grants. And current and former foster youth receiving Cal Grants will now qualify for an access award up to $6,000 for non-tuition expenses. And so this is on top of the Cal Grant. So new and renewal students receiving either the Cal Grant A or B can qualify up to the $6,000. New or renewal students receiving the Cal Grant C will be $4,000. Students will also can be eligible for the CHAFE, the Cal Grant, and then this additional access award aid. For students, this is for students who were in foster youth between the ages of 16 and 18. So also really exciting news. And then we have the California Dreamer Service Incentive Grant. This is also being offered again this year. And this is for students who complete the California DREAM Act and who are our Cal Grant B recipients who submitted, again, the California DREAM Act. They can be considered for up to an award of $3,000 per year. Students must perform community service work. So they must perform either 100 hours per quarter or 150 per semester. And this is also administered by the California Student Aid Commission. They would have to students would indicate how many hours they completed, upload their hours. And then for more information, we're going to share this deck with you all, but there's more information on the website below. Okay, and then competitive versus entitlement awards. So eligible current high school seniors or recent high school graduates are entitled to receive the Cal Grant only if GPA was submitted for their high school. However, with the new expansion on the community college students can again reestablish their GPA after attending community college for up to 16 credits and reestablish that GPA. But students who do submit this, they may be eligible for the entitlement awards if they submit the financial aid applications by the March 2nd deadline. And so we recommend that students once they submit their FAFSA or California DREAM Act, that they log into their web grants to check for their award status, if there's any requirements that they need to do, if they need to verify that they've graduated. This is where you can manage all Cal grants through the web grants. And so our best practice is, if your students did not meet the GPA minimum by the start of their senior year, it's important to check with them around their high school graduation and resubmit their GPAs. This is the best practice that we recommend. And if the student does not meet Cal Grant eligibility, again, just keeping in mind what institution they are planning on attending, whether that is a 4-year or a community college. If it is a 4-year and they've missed the March 2nd deadline, they may be placed into a competitive award pool and they're no longer entitled to that Cal Grant necessarily. So they're competing with others to see if they could be, they'll be receiving that aid. When students fall into that competitive pool, it's usually because they do not meet the GPA requirement, the minimum GPA requirement. They didn't submit their financial aid by March 2nd. We see this often. And when counselors didn't submit last year's grad GPA. And so we recommend, again, that students can only receive their entitlement grant if it is met by the high school and the school submits it. Okay, and now going on to the middle class award amounts. And so this is for students attending a UC and CSU who were not eligible for the Cal Grant A or B, and they will automatically be considered for the middle class scholarship. Again, it's through the web grants account that the student needs to log in to see if they've been awarded, and the amounts are here for CSUs. It's maximum award of $2,298. For UCs, it's $5,028, and income and assets must be less than 190,000. Okay, and then just GPA submissions by the school. Again, best practice is that to ensure that GPA is submitted by the school, that the student's name matches what's on their financial aid application. Sometimes students leave out their second illegal name, or they have a different first name. And so oftentimes this will cause a mismatch on WebGrants account, and this will delay the disbursement of financial aid. And so just ensuring that there's a name mismatch. WebGrants is also where you can check to see if the student's full legal name, and then if there's any mismatch with that information as well. All right, and I'm going to turn it over to Itzel.
That was a lot of really good information. So make sure you take a good deep breath and process that and ask us questions if you need to. But I'm going to go really into like what we need to do for the application, right? So needed documents. We have 4 students and 4 parents, and I really want to know that this is, the list here is a long list, but it's only if it applies to you, what you will need. So for students, you're going to need your social security number if it applies to you. If you worked in your 2020 W-2 forms, and if filed your 2020 income tax returns. If it applies to you, your legal permanent residency card and your list of colleges that you're interested in. And last but not least, a record of untaxed income, such as Social Security benefits or welfare benefits. For parents, it's very similar. All the same kind of things, except parental marital status and marriage and divorce date, the date of birth, and access to bank account statements and information. So very similar. And again, it's only what applies to you and that parent. Every situation's different, and we're happy to help with that if you have questions. So again, we touched base on the applications, but I really want to emphasize FAFSA or California DREAM Act. So you do one application or the other. So I want to talk a little bit about the differences between the two. So for FAFSA, you are going to need a social security number. That's necessary to just complete the FAFSA. You will need a safe key, a password, and then a safe key for that specific application. And then the nice thing about that application, though, it saves automatically. So as soon as you go to the next page, it's saving while you're doing it. So if you ever have to like step away, maybe you don't have all the documents, you can go ahead and go back and not worry about it not saving. Again, FAFSA, the reason Social Security is needed is because it's a federal application. This is going to go to all 50 states and territories, which gives you access to federal and state aid. The other nice thing is when you finish FAFSA, it kind of gives you an award amount estimate. So you'll see the confirmation page and see that kind of listed on there. For California DREAM Act, it's a little bit different, right? You don't need a social security number. There's no save key. option on there. So that's something we really, really want to focus on, is that every time you are going to log off, you make sure you save that application, because you don't want to miss that step where you're at. Again, this is for California residents only. So you must go to a California institution and be a California resident to get that. So it's because it's giving you access to only state funds, which is in California. And you don't get an estimate at the end of the DREAM Act, but you do get your EFC, which Rondell talked about. And now we're really kind of going to dive into the California DREAM Act. This is the application and the website for the California DREAM Act. Again, it opens October 1st and closes March 2nd. Access to state aid only, right? This is for students who are AB 540 and SB 68. So this is including all students who are undocumented or those who have a social security number because of DACA, TPS, or U visas. And again, this is for students who are attending California colleges or universities, including community college students. We talk about AB 540 and SB 200. I want to really touch base on what that is. So this is basically exempts students from paying out-of-state tuition or non-resident tuition. So let's just step back on what that means. So for a student who is a California resident, at College of Marin, since I am the College of Marin program manager, I'm going to use that as an example. You're paying $46 for a unit. So most of our classes, depending on the class, if it's a 4-unit class, you're paying about $180 per class. If you're not a resident or you're classified as a non-resident, your tuition is a lot higher. We're looking at $265 per unit. That's averaging over $1,000 for a one class that's a 4-unit class. So that's a big difference. And we want to make sure that if our student is eligible to be a resident or classified as a resident, then we take that. And the way to do that, you must meet the following requirements. So have attended 3 years in a California school, so that lists all different schools, and obtain a California high school diploma, GED, or CHESP, associate's degree, or receive enough units to transfer. You have to attend an accredited California college or university. So again, staying in California with that California money, and complete an affidavit with the college. So you're completing this affidavit, and I'll show you on the next slide what it looks like, but you're completing that at every college you're attending. So if you transfer over, let's say you start at College of Marin, you transfer over to Sonoma State, you're gonna have to do that affidavit with that school at each institution you attend. If you go to the next slide, we will see, let me just talk about the expansion. So the expansion on this was AB 540 and SB 2000 kind of focused on a high school and attending high school in the public schools. SB 68 kind of just expanded that, ended it to California adult schools and community colleges. So getting those units and credits in to reach those 3 years while you're also attending adult school or community colleges, or just combining it, right? Also, if you obtain a GED in California or associate's degree, or just the minimum transfer requirements, that can make you eligible to get that in-state tuition. So you might do a couple of years at a community college to get that residency tuition. So this is an example of what the affidavit looks like. So you'd be clicking one of these boxes depending on what suits your situation or that student's situation, and then checking one of the boxes in column A and B. Eventually it asks you what school you're attending and to show where the proof is of those 3 years of eligibility. Again, with SB 68, you can include community colleges, but including high schools, any combination of California schools that you attended to complete those 3 years. So now I'm going to talk about the difference between social security numbers and ITIN. So this is a common question that comes up when doing, especially the DREAM Act. So just to be clear, social security numbers are for FAFSA students. They are required for that application. That's actually one of the ways that you create your account for that application. For California DREAM Act, it's a little bit different. It's not required, and students can either choose to put in their, let's say they have a DACA social or they have a social but are undocumented, they have the option to put that in there, if not putting zeros all the way through. Same thing for ITINs. This is common, especially for our undocumented community, with like the parents, once you're entering that information. On the DREAM Act, and you can enter the 9. Usually ITINs start with that 9 and enter that number, or you also have the option of putting the zeros. And same thing for FAFSA. If the parents do not have a social security number, entering those zeros on there as well. I'd just like to remind students, everybody here, that you are protected over FERPA, and Rondell kind of mentioned that earlier. And this is kind of what the application looks like. There's a whole revamp going on, so it might look a little bit different, but I like showing like what you're looking at and what website to look at, because sometimes it could gear us to different places. The first slide is kind of like the first page that you see. The second slide is once you get into the application, see that green button that says save application. That's that magic button that we need to click if you need to save the application or stop. One main thing too that gets asked a lot is selective service registration. You will get asked that in the application. So all males must register and submit confirmation to receive financial aid. Again, it's a little bit different between FAFSA and California DREAM Act. For FAFSA, it's a button. You register through the application. For California DREAM Act, you're actually going to have to print out this paper form and mail it out. You'll see the image at the bottom. That's kind of the look of it. But yeah, you have to sign in for both, but just mail it in for California DREAM Act students. Another cool thing about the California DREAM Act is the verification codes at the end. So this page that we're looking at in this image shows a couple of comment codes at the end of that confirmation page. So once you hit submit, you check this comment codes and it gives you a couple of things. Like it shows if you're going to be verified, which a lot of our students are, and we can touch base more on what that is. But just in case that school is going to need more information on it, it also shows you like if there is an EFC or if there isn't, and common codes for verification are 170 and 171. So if you see those, that's most likely flagging you for a verification code. So paying attention to that red print and the codes on there is important to just get the student going with that verification process and getting them ready. Another really important thing for the DREAM Act is your ID number. This will be after you submit your first time. That number is going to stay the same. That is basically your identification number for the DREAM Act application. We really encourage students to save this number, because if any challenges arise or we need to touch base on call CSAC for any reason, this is the number they're going to reference. So for verification, financial aid, anything, I encourage it to save it with your passwords. And it's at the top right-hand corner of the application. And then lastly, so to submit your application, your parent needs to sign if you are a dependent. So the way of signing, it's a little bit different for the California DREAM Act. It's an additional step at the end, and it's a 4-digit PIN that you will create for your parent. Again, it's you create it for a parent, and it's going to be the same thing every year in the same PIN. So saving that also with your DREAM Act ID and password. You can see it on that image. It's a separate step, and it submits by itself, but it won't fully get processed until that parent signs that application as well. And one of the things we kind of touch base on, but troubleshooting, so name change and birth date. So name and birth date for student and parents only are the only items that cannot be edited on California DREAM Act after submitting. So in order to change that, you must submit a change request that looks like this. And the reason we bring this up is sometimes there's a name difference between the school and what you submitted. For example, a very common one is 2 last names. If you forget to include 1 last name in each one, the application might not find itself. So the way to submit and adjust that to fit the same thing as a school in the application is to submit this form here. So that's really important, because we do see that a lot. It's with that California DREAM Act application.
We're now going to be moving on with the FSA ID, and now the user, also known as the username ID. And the reason we want to talk about the FSA ID is this is where we sometimes spend a lot of time with students and parents and just troubleshooting. Sometimes just working on the FSA ID with students or parents takes more time than the actual application. And so to save you all some time, we want to just talk about what the FSA ID is. So the FSA ID is an electronic signature. Each, like the student and parent, will have to have a username and password. For the username, it's between 6 and 30 characters. The password is between 8 and 30 characters. The username is not case sensitive, so it's a combination of letters and numbers. The password is case sensitive, so uppercase, lowercase, and numbers. And the individual can't use any self-identifier. So not to include the name, last name, date of birth, it will not let you continue if it has any of those self-identifiers. And again, this is the electronic signature. The FSA ID is used to log into the FAFSA and also at the end to submit the application itself. Again, both students and parents need their own unique FSA ID. They cannot have the same password or username. It can't be associated with the same email or phone number. Undocumented parents with no valid Social Security numbers can input zeros instead of a number or ITIN, and sometimes it'll flag it. It'll read as error, but you just confirm it. It'll ask it again. I think it does it twice, but just confirm that there are no errors after inputting all zeros, and it'll let you continue. Another FSA enhancement is that individuals can log in either with their username, email, but also now a verified mobile phone number. And sometimes I see this go a little bit quicker, but the individual, the student or parent does need to verify the phone number, and they can verify it when creating the FSA ID. Okay, and so some of the challenges I already talked about. An email address or phone number can only be associated with one FSA ID. It has to be different from the student and parent. Sometimes when an FSA ID is created, they include the name, the date of birth, Social Security, and then when they go into the application itself, they'll leave out like there's a typo, or they don't include the legal name and there's a mismatch. And this will not allow the student to submit or the parent to sign the signature page at the electronic signature page at the end. And so just making sure before creating that FSA ID that there are no typos, that the date of birth, the Social Security is a match. And then a second challenge is for getting the username and password. You have to go through Manage My FSA ID to reset the password. And so sometimes that takes some time. If the individual did have a mismatch, it's going to flag it. And so just recommending that the students write down their username and password, and same with parents. And then after attempting too many times to log in, the account will be locked and the student will have to wait up to 30 minutes before able to log back in. And so if they're working with you, that's 30 minutes that they're not able to continue working on their application. And so just the best practice, ensuring everything is entered correctly, and then saving that somewhere, because this is an application that they're going to want to revisit when making corrections every year. And so just having that easily accessible will expedite the process. And then another challenge that we often see is if we're working with the student and they have a younger or older sibling who's already in college, it's likely that the parent already has an ID, because they would have had to create either an FSA ID, or if it was before the FSA ID, they're already in the system. And so sometimes when they want to recreate it, it will not allow them. And if they have an email that they're no longer using, sometimes you have to contact FSA ID contact information for that support. And they can try troubleshooting if they do have access to that email through the Manage My FSA ID portal to reset that password or update the email that they want their account associated with. For the parent signature, for students who have parents without a valid Social Security number, they will be unable to submit the electronic signature page. So instead, at the end, it provides another option for that signature page, and it'll be a paper copy that they will need to print, sign, and then mail. And on that same form has the mailing address with the instructions. After any edits that the student does make, a signature page needs to follow each of those edits. And so a student may submit, they can send their parents' signature page by mail, but if they come back to it 2 weeks, a week, and make any edits, they will be prompted again to provide a signature page for the parent, and that will be again the paper copy for those that are unable to create an FSA ID. Students must also make sure that they're submitting, they press on the submit button. Sometimes they'll print the signature page, but not submit the actual application. And so if that happens and they mail the parent signature page, if the application wasn't submitted, they're not going to match it, and they'll just discard that paper signature page. And so just making sure they're clicking submit and then mailing that signature page. Something also just to keep in mind, if you're working with the student on March 2nd, it does need to be postmarked for March 2nd. And so just making sure that either the student can mail it immediately and that they have that as an option, or printer as well.
Good morning, everybody. So now we're going to go into our FAFSA application. Just to start off with, we do have this all-in-one website, the studentaid.gov, where they are able to essentially find all the different platforms that students need to either do any follow-up, access their loans in their future, their FSA ID profile, or their My FAFSA. This is a website for you to bookmark, to have handy with you all the time, since it is a catch-all for you to be able to navigate. One of the perks of this website as well is that it has a very informative like counselor tab on there for any follow-up questions that you may have, or special situations that can maybe help you find the answer to best support the students that you are serving. One thing I always like to add is to also follow their YouTube page. They have very quick and easy YouTube videos where they are able to answer special circumstance or help you provide any updates that may have happened for that filing year. And so FAFSA is our free application student. That's exactly what that name stands for. It's open from October 1st and closes on March 2nd. And so this is the application that our students who are U.S. citizens, legal permanent residents, and individuals who are granted asylum use to apply to see their eligibility for financial aid. And so some quick need to knows. They're filing for the year of using the filing for the year of 2020. Going to be completing the question for Schedule 1, which will be, I think, just to name. I know this year 2020 was a bit financially chaotic, and so there is a lot of unknowns on what awardings will be looking like, and it will be case by case. And so Schedule 1 does encompass, especially when parents or guardians are unemployed, and so it's something to name that, to be mindful of what they are completing if the student has the file for Schedule 1. If yes, it will autofill for a 0, and to really follow the notes area on the side to make sure that they are completing that correctly. If the Schedule 1 was filled out because of those listed boxes on there, then the question should be answered as a no. Also, for your knowledge, students who are children of fallen officers will receive their Max Pell Grant. And part of FAFSA is that they are on a mobile app now, and the IRS their DRT, the retrieval tool, is also available now on the app. There's still the need of filing the Schedule 1 info since it's not fully pulling from the IRS retrieval tool, so just be mindful of that. And just like what we just said, the catch-all website for students to be able to file or do any follow-up is on that student aid website that we just listed. One best practice that we always have is that we encourage for you all to ask students to bring everything that they have available when it comes to their financial history, not just those bits and pieces, so that if they have everything, when we do ask those probing questions or have any follow-up to do as they're filling out their application, everything is as readily available. And so just as Itzel had mentioned, that list of documents for them to come prepared for when filing for their financial aid is to have everything included in there as much as possible. It's always great to have more information than less. And so it's a best practice to encourage your students to come prepared with anything financial documentation that they have available. One thing that we do want to know is that there will be updates to the FAFSA specific questions that are being asked. The first one that comes up is the drug conviction question, and then the selected service. That will be phased out throughout the next couple of years. And so for this upcoming year, the questions will still be present there, but it will no longer be an eligibility requirement. And for the year 2023 to 24, the department plans on removing those questions completely, and it will just be an option for them to enroll for selected service via FAFSA. things to keep in mind as you're supporting your students in filing for the application. This is really where you as a counselor, as a teacher, as an educator, you're asking them those probing questions to really help them figure out, okay, what are some of the factors that you need to consider as you're completing your application? And those are listed here. When you're working with students is figuring out, do they have divorced parents? That's where that 50 plus 1% rule comes into play. Are the parents undocumented? How are we going to be filing with them? Do they have parents who are supporting from a different country? Is the student in foster care currently between the ages of 16 to 18? Do they have documentation of that? Was the student homeless or is unaccompanied? Do they have documentation for any of this? These are questions that are going to be asked as they're completing their application. And for you as a counselor to be mindful when asking these questions to just keep aware, because that will affect the way that they are answering their questions, and will probably need a little bit more additional support as they are completing their application, depending on what their story is as a student. Once they are completing, towards the end, they will be receiving their student aid report. I do recognize that this is a little bit more up to date now, since I know it's mentioned that they're updating their systems. There is like the fancy drop down menus in the student aid report currently for this year. But one thing to know is that they will be receiving on this page what their respective family contribution is. This is really just a summary to be able to tell the parents and guardians and the student on what their potential expectation is on how much aid they will be receiving for any respective school that they will be attending for that year, but also it's that realistically on how much are they expected to contribute as families and as students. And so that's the number that you are receiving there. A rule of thumb that we always have when that asterisk is on that EFC amount, we know that that student's going to be verified at their specific school. And so talking to them about what that verification is and what that process is like. And I know during our training tomorrow morning, we'll be going into detail of what verification looks like for students and what exactly they can expect as they are navigating that process. It is always a rule of thumb to just, I think, keep alert for when you're looking at the student aid report when your student is completing the FAFSA. And so now we will be going into breakout rooms. We have 2 different scenarios for you all to complete. In these breakout rooms, we want you all to see what information we are providing with you today. And as you're working with your student, what information is existing, what information do you need additionally, and what questions do you all have as you're completing the scenario and are role playing in completing and helping support each student A and then student B on completing either their FAFSA or California DREAM Act. So to be conscious of time, let's move on to the next slide. This is one great resource for you all to have just to practice on different scenarios that may come up as you're supporting dozens of students throughout the next couple months. We will be including this in our follow-up email for you all to be able to join in on this demo site that is available for you to go through different scenarios that exist or can exist. We have that IRS data retrieval tool, like it was just stated, like it will automatically pull majority of that information in for the student to help reduce verification challenges later. It's important for students to note that it will transfer about 95% of everything. It will still have those questions of like how much is in the savings account that they have to answer, but the questions that the students have to answer is minimal. And so it is a nifty tool to be able to use for students to provide the most accurate information available. The one thing to know is that once it transfers over, students can't edit the responses. It's automatically just transfer that information over. So just be mindful of that. And it requires the parent or guardian to have a valid FSA ID. So what qualifies a student to identify as a dependent or independent student? Independent students have to be 24 years of age, or they're married and or have children that they support 50% or more throughout that given year. They are foster youth or in court order legal guardianship. They're an emancipated minor, or they are a documented homeless or at risk of being homeless individual. And that's determined just by any legal paperwork that may be provided already for them to be able to identify as a homeless or at-risk individual. And so those are the qualifications to be considered an independent student. And so there is that process of, let's say, and I know I come across this with working with our college students of, I'm not speaking for my parents maybe for a couple months, or they have not been supporting me in some shape or form. There is the opportunity to do dependency override. It's a process for students to be considered as independent when they don't meet any of the previous listed qualifications. The students can't select independent on a FAFSA or California DREAM Act, even though they might have a legitimate reason on why they should be considered to be an independent student. As you're considering dependency override, or the student is considering dependency override, some of the qualifications that we see there is that there is absolutely no parental or guardian contact. There's no court-ordered documents showing proof not emancipated, but are still in some shape or form independent. If a student does not have explicit proof of independence, it's really up to the individual campus and the financial aid office at that campus to determine that dependency status. And so every process that every campus has looks a little bit differently. Sometimes they may require 1 or 2 letters and then a statement from the student. In other cases, it might be 4 letters from verified sources. It all definitely depends on the financial aid office that the student will be attending for that application year. And so what will the student need? Again, I want to reemphasize that it's dependent on the school that they will be attending, and helping them do that research of what that process looks like and what they're asking of the student to submit. They're going to be asking for those letters of support, reading really what that criteria is of who are qualified to be able to provide those letters, that constant advocacy and communication with the financial aid office at that campus, keeping in consistent communication, making sure the student understands what is it that they are asking of them to be able to be considered for that dependency override. And the big one is that persistence. It can be challenging for the student to be speaking up about what is happening for them, what they've been going through. And so working with them and being able to provide that support and space to continue on with this additional process that they have to go through to state that they are an independent student, and help them navigate what that process looks like. And so encouraging words is always necessary to support these students as they're navigating their individual financial aid office, and as they're keeping that consistent communication with that financial aid officer that they may be working with. And so know that those letters of support are key, and really helping them unpack what is that they're going through to help them be considered to have that dependency override process. To vocalize where they are at, what are they navigating to be successful as college students. Tomorrow's training will go into the different approaches on how to support students, the different additional systems that they may have to navigate. Thank you, everybody that has attended.